Good evening. I'm hereby calling to order the May 14th, 2018 meeting of the Mayfield Heights City Council. May I have a roll call, please, Lisa? What do I have?
May 30th.
Oh, sorry, May 30th. I'm reading the, what the minutes are.
Oh, okay. Mr. Balestria?
Present.
Mr. DeJohn?
Here.
Mrs. Finney?
Here.
Mr. Mano?
Here.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Here.
Mrs. Snyder?
Here.
Mrs. Teresi?
Here. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Welcome everyone this evening, and now we will talk about May 14th, which were our minutes. There were two meetings that day. There was a council of the whole meeting and a regular council meeting. So I trust everyone had a chance to read them over. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the council of the whole meeting on May 14th, 2018? Moved by Mr. Balestria, seconded by Mrs. Snyder. Are there any suggested changes, amendments, or deletions to these minutes? Seeing none, all in favor of the approval signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes stand as approved. Next, we'll look at the minutes for the regular council meeting on May 14, 2018. Everyone had a chance to read those? Do I have a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Mano, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. Are there any suggested changes, amendments, or deletions to the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor saying, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Sorry, I'm getting a little tongue twisted. Okay, the minutes stand approved. Next on the agenda are correspondence and announcements. Does any member of council have any correspondence or announcements? Okay, seeing none, we'll move to reports of officers, starting with the mayor. Mayor DeSica.
Thank you, Madam President. Good evening, everyone. We have a long agenda this evening, so I'll keep my report short. I want to start by saying thank you to Nick Tagg for putting together a great Memorial Day program that we had on Monday. He did a great job, and I want to thank the police and the fire department honor guards. They did an awesome job also. I want to give council and our residents an update on our healthcare committee. Recently, the committee approved the use of United Healthcare wellness dollars to purchase a detox sauna for the fire department. The sauna is designed to sweat out any toxins fire personnel have encountered while performing their duties. This allows our firemen to take preventative measures to ensure their health and well-being after working to save life and property. Another portion of the funds are earmarked for other wellness initiatives. Also, I want to thank Kim Stika of the Fidelity Group for securing an additional $2,500 from United Healthcare, and to United Healthcare for approving the purchase of the detox sauna. Last week, Lorna Zeller and Tammy Kleins visited many of our businesses, in our corporate park, to drop off flyers informing them of the upcoming Lander Road construction project, which will commence in a couple weeks. The flyers inform them of start dates, scope of work, detours, and the reality that there will be delays. Our hope is that the information will allow for adjustments and commutes and minimize the inconvenience. Excuse me. We have received very positive feedback from reaching out to the businesses, and they're happy that they can give their employees a heads up. And speaking of the road program, in addition to Lander Road, work on Somme Center Road will start June 4th. The work will be done all at night, and the length of the project is about 4 nights. Work on Commonwealth has begun, as you can see, and Fruitland will start also on June 4th. The dates are posted to our media sites and will be updated as needed. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mayor. Are there any questions from the mayor?
One quick question.
Mr. Mano?
Mayor, I got a phone call from a resident on Ranch Lane, and they said that there are sidewalks and aprons being put in. Is that part of the contract, or is that something that's, are they gonna do the whole street, or what are they doing?
I doubt it's the whole street. Let Joe answer that question.
Any other questions from the mayor?
That's the gas company, yeah, working there. So I don't think they're gonna do everything.
Joe?
They're doing the aprons in the sidewalks?
Or some aprons, yes. And on the east side of the street, they had an open cut. They weren't able to slip the pipe. There's a little more sidewalks than it is.
She was under the impression everybody was gonna get new sidewalks and aprons.
That's the gas company's problem.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fenaro. Any other questions for the mayor? Okay, then we'll move on to Law Director, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have no report this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Are there any questions for Mr. Murphy? Director of Finance, Mr. Tribby.
No report this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Tribby. Are there any questions for Mr. Tribby? Seeing none, we'll move on to reports of committees, commissions, and boards. First, we'll start with the Building Committee, Mrs. Snyder.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our committee has not met. I have no report.
Thank you, Mrs. Snyder. Are there any questions for Mrs. Snyder? Mrs. Snyder, I've had several people in the community ask me to look at ordinances with signs because they feel that we need to look at updating the signs. So no rush, but maybe we could have a building committee meeting over the summer, start to looking at other cities and seeing what their sign ordinances are. Because I guess they're saying that they feel that we need to start updating our signs to compete with other cities. Okay, so no rush
We'll
whenever.
schedule that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, we'll move to Finance and Audit Committee, Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you, Madam President. No report.
Thank you, Mrs. Sabetta. Any questions for Mrs. Sabetta? Legislative Committee, Mrs. Teresi.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The Legislative Committee has not met, so I have no report.
Thank you, Mrs. Teresi. Are there any questions for Mrs. Teresi? Public Works and Service Committee, Mr. Balestria.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The Public Works and Services Committee did meet on 5/24/18. Was a rather extensive committee meeting. Several items were addressed, and I've asked Mr. Fernaro and Mr. Gerson to make themselves available for any questions council may have that I am not able to answer this evening. And I apologize because the minutes have yet to become available because of the length of the meeting and rather extensive discussion we had. So we'll take up those items as they come up on the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Balestria. Are there any questions for Mr. Balestria? Mrs. Teresi?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I had a resident call me saying that at 1:30 one afternoon, I think it was April 23rd and 24th is what she told me, that they watched two Mayfield Heights dump trucks get filled with dirt at Oakville Park. And the resident followed this truck to County Line and Battle Roads to a Bates Nursery where they watched the dirt get unloaded. I couldn't answer because I didn't know anything about it. I mentioned that it was a contract job that we had given to Oakville Park, and council had approved the contractor to do this work. The resident said this wasn't the only day that they watched the dirt get loaded in our trucks and taken out. I told them I would ask tonight so they would have an answer. I don't know if Mr. Balestria, can you or Mr.
I cannot
Fenaro?
address that. I don't know the answer to that.
Mr. Fenaro?
And they also sent me a picture if anybody wanted to see.
So what they seen was bricks from the old foundation being moved. And we did haul it to Bates. They had a hole they needed filled. So it was extra work. So to cut down on price, we removed it from them. And yes, we did haul it to Bates.
So we hauled the dirt.
Not dirt, bricks and foundation. That
Bricks and
wasn't part of the
foundation.
original contract.
And do we have to pay to dump that out in
No,
a Bates?
we did not.
Mr., I'm sorry, are you done, Mrs. Teresi?
I just want to ask another, wait 1 second, I'm sorry. Okay, so the resident tells me he was really upset. He thought it was our tax dollars that were being used instead of the contractor.
Tax dollars being saved by hauling that debris away.
So, okay,
Mr. Mano?
thank you.
You know, in conjunction with that, last week, there were 3, maybe 4 trips up and down Fruitland, dump trucks loaded with stuff, and I had a resident call me and want to know where all that stuff was going, what it was. Based on everything that's going on over there, is there a chance that we can get some kind of an accounting of what's been done, how much has been spent, what's left to do, and how much more are these is this contractor going to need to complete that job? I've also had rumors. People have said to me that the contractor, I guess his employees' checks have been bouncing. Some of the suppliers have demanded to be paid directly because he is evidently not paying. I mean, you know, when we first got involved with this guy, it was a sketchy situation to begin with, if you guys recall that meeting we had. Maybe it wasn't such a good idea to go with him with the track record that he had. Now, there's no way that that park is going to be ready this year. It's not going to happen. They can grade, they can do whatever they want to do there, but that park's not going to be ready. The pavilion, from a distance, the pavilion looks great. Nice design, everything's good. Yet, go inside the pavilion, man, you can go crazy in there with a punch list because of the way things are. It's disheveled. I just would like to know where we stand at this point. Money spent, work done for that money, and what's left to do, and how much more money are we talking about for that park?
Mr. Gerson, did you have something?
Yeah, right now, all the pay estimates have been submitted to finance. They've been reviewed by me. There have been some extras regarding the foundation on the building that was there. There was a lot more than what was anticipated. That was unforeseen. But right now, we are under budget on the project. Frankly, I think the contractor's doing a pretty good job considering the weather. He still has time to finish, and you know, the project is going as well as it could be expected. Are there some hiccups? Yes, but I frankly don't think that the condition of the work is bad. So if you've seen something, you can clearly put a punch list together for myself. If you see something or would like to meet out there, we can go over it. Be happy to meet with you and go over those.
Well, if we're under budget, then there shouldn't be a problem with providing some kind of a printout of what we've done so far and what we've spent so far,
Yeah,
and what's left to do.
Those pay estimates have been submitted to the city, and there'll be an accounting when all said and done. But those have been followed with the unit prices and gone through. So,
Thank you, Mr. Gerson.
He is bonded, correct?
yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Mrs. Snyder?
Since we're talking about the park, this just came up. I did have a resident ask me about the the lighting over there. I don't recall us ever going through the lighting, but they're worried about how dark it will be.
Yeah, so the only lighting that's been changed is there are lights in the pavilion. There's 3 LED lights that have been installed. No other lighting has been changed out there. No other lighting has been planned. It wasn't part of the park project.
But the lighting's not on now, though, like during the construction, correct? Because it is pretty dark over there, and the residents were concerned.
Yeah, during the night, I'm not positive. I haven't been over there, but I can check that out.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Tribby? All cell facilities and wireless support structures. So if you can coordinate a meeting on that, please.
Will do.
Thank you. So we will move on now to Parks and Recreation. Mr. Mano.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Drag-A-Pool opens this coming Friday, June 1st. On Friday, all pool pass sales will move to the pool and will be sold from 2 p.m. to close. Unity Days is just around the corner, June 22nd to 24th. Pre-sale wristbands are available now through June 22nd and can be purchased at Drag-A-Pool or City Hall in the Recreation Department. Watch the website and Facebook for updates. The parade is Sunday, June 24th at 1 p.m. The parade will step off from the greens of Lyndhurst again this year. The 2018 parade marshal is Andy Baskin, a local sports director and on-air personality. New this year, the parade will have the theme of the 80s. We are looking for floats and organizations to participate. Also, we are looking for 1 or 2 classic cars from each decade from the 1930s through the 80s. If interested, please contact the Recreation Department at 440-442-2627. And that's my report.
Thank you, Mr. Mano. Are there any questions for Mr. Mano? Seeing none, we'll move on to Safety and Transportation. Mr. DeJohn.
Thank you, Madam President. The Safety and Transportation Committee did meet at the request of Chief Bruce Elliott to discuss a proposed new fire engine. Mr. Elliott, or Chief Elliott, did prepare a PowerPoint presentation, which you all got in your packets, and he did a wonderful job at explaining his request for this fire truck. This truck will be replacing engine number 511, a 1989 pumper truck. This truck currently does not meet National Fire Protection Agency standards, especially for safety. In addition, it's very hard to get repair parts for it. Engine 511 is also used to back up engine 512 when it's in for maintenance. So NFPA recommends that the first line truck should be no more than 15 years old, and engine 512 is approaching that age at this time. The new fire truck will be our first line truck, and engine 512 will be backing it up. And Chief Elliott formed a committee within the department of his top technical people and with high mechanical aptitude to determine what fire truck was best, what manufacturer the city should use, and these men did a great job in deciding on which fire truck we'll be purchasing. And the chief gave his stamp of approval on that. The cost will not exceed $600,000, and it will take at least a year for the truck to come in. Mr. Tribby will determine once it comes to council how we'll be paying for that truck. So I'm assuming that'll be on the agenda in the next few meetings to come. So thank you. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. DeJohn. Is there any questions for Mr. DeJohn? Next, Board of Zoning Appeals, Mrs. Sabetta.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We have several items on the agenda that we can address when they come forth.
Thank you, Mrs. Sabetta. Is there any questions for Mrs. Sabetta? Next, Planning Commission, Mr. Balestria.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It was a busy week for committee meetings. We did meet on 5/21/18. We had five business items to be addressed, of which one is Resolution 2018-36 on our agenda, and 4 of them are in the form of motions, and we'll discuss them as they present themselves.
Thank you, Mr. Balestria. Are there any questions of Mr. Balestria? Next, we move on to the public portion of the meeting. Pursuant to City Code, each person will be allotted 5 minutes to speak, with a maximum of 30 minutes allotted for the entire public portion. Although it is not a time for public debate, this is your opportunity to address council with your concerns. Please know that no personal attacks or comments will be allowed. Also, if you are here in connection with an agenda item, this is your opportunity to address council. If you would like to be heard this evening, please raise your hand and be recognized. Then approach the podium and state your name and address for the record. It is now 6:50. Sounds kind of strange. Open the public portion. Mr. Rinker, did you?
Thank you, Madam President. Let me start by saying we have 2 different items on the agenda. I'll try to get it done in 5 minutes. We need some help there. The first is with the Board of Zoning Appeals. There are 2 resolutions in front of you. One deals with the front yard setback, and then the other deals with the lot size itself. And I have, I think as a good point of reference, the aerial, we've used this before. This is the corner lot that we're referring to, where the ARIA Assisted Living Facility, Senior Assisted Living Facility is going to go. And as you know, when we were here before and talked about the use, the exception that was approved, we said all along this is really designed to look like a single-family home in an area that is a mix of different types of uses, but the 2 adjacent properties do have single-family residences. There's a very generous code requirement for the front yard setback off of Cedar. It's 90 feet, which for the size of the house, and I'll get back to the footprint in a moment, it would push the house farther north. And we would need a variance off of the north boundary line. And it just seemed to make better sense to push the house back towards Cedar so there would not be, it would give relief to the property to the north, meet code for that setback, but require a 10-foot variance for the front yard setback against Cedar. And given the location, that just seemed to be the more logical way to go. Board of Zoning Appeals agreed with that after a lot of questioning. I think everyone understood that this is a better outcome, a better way to obviate the need for any variance. And then in terms of the use, even though all along we've said this is going to be a single family detached style construction, it's 1 story. There are going to be 18 beds. We did increase the footprint internally to add 1 bedroom, but we haven't increased the number of beds. And I'll show you the site plan, the floor plan in just a moment. But the overall use is the same as we discussed before. There's been no change in that. In your code, under 116210A, I think it is, the requirement is that you have to have 3 acres typically for one of these developments. The code does say you can have one that's smaller if you are contiguous to a similar U2A1 project. Well, in fact, we're not contiguous to one, but they are in the general area. And a lot of discussion at BZA on that. The minutes reflect a certain amount of it. I'm sure Mrs. Sabetta can answer any other questions, but the bottom line is we felt that it really made sense to site this. We avoid a campus style. We don't need 3 acres. This is just under 1 acre for the property, and so the variance, which may seem substantial, it's just over 2 acres when you measure against the 3. But if you consider that the code itself allows provision for something of this size, but it just so happens we have these 2 residences next to us. And again, the design of the structure is to be more compatible with those 2 adjacent properties. So again, I think Board of Zoning Appeals recommendation recognized that this is, given the different kinds of uses in the area, compatible design. I'm going to show you a color rendering of the footprint as we had it before and draw your attention to this space, kind of a cove and indented area, and then the articulated edge along the northwest edge of the home. And after discussion with the builders, Mr. Hanson recognized that he could probably make better use essentially of the same footprint, so it doesn't change any variances for setbacks. And he filled in that space by providing a sunroom, which will still walk out into the patio area. Over here, we're able to shift kind of student body left by making 1 long wall here, and it added some square footage. In the code, it shows that the square footage has increased from a roughly 5,500 square feet to just over 59, but in fact, it's just under 5,900 square feet. And that's all incorporated in this area and in this area. But in terms of separation from adjacent properties, it's made no change. Planning Commission, we discussed that at Planning Commission, and I think we answered the questions Planning Commission members had regarding that. And then finally, the overall site geometry has gone through extensive review from Police Department, Fire Department, and TMS went through and issued 2 different reports addressing the overall traffic movements and the design features, and I'll go over them here. We still have 2 curb entries as far away from the intersection as we can make them. Per the recommendation of TMS, we've added this kind of pork chop, which allows a right turn in only for southbound lander, but for exit, it's both a right and a left turn. If there's going to be any queuing, any impact, it's going to be internal to the site. So Mr. Schweikert felt that that was appropriate. And then similarly down here, we have full service. Given the amount of traffic, because it has nominal impact to the traffic, as TMS noted, the existing traffic patterns, this gives people a good option. Plus, the assistant fire chief really was very insistent that we keep 2 through movements through the site for safety purposes.
Excuse me, Mr. Rinker. I think we need to have a motion to extend Mr. Rinker's time 5 more minutes. Moved by Mrs. Snyder, seconded by Mrs. Teresi. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much, and I'll try to wrap it up. I know you have a long agenda, but again, we went from 22 feet originally for the drive aisle width. is now 25 feet all the way through. We've added a fire lane at the direction of the fire department along here. We've got sufficient width for the parallel parking in front. We actually reoriented the sign. Originally, we had it at a diagonal. Now it's directly, specifically code compliant as it's lined up perpendicular to Cedar. We've added, again, at TMS's recommendation, 2 places for potential reciprocal access points, cross easements to the adjacent properties in the event they have future development. This would make those connectable to the existing property. There'll be stop signs placed at the exit areas to remind motorists to stop before they get out into the stream of traffic. And I think that covers all the specific points for the site plan. Again, we've met all the requirements that we received from police, fire, and from TMS, your traffic engineers. We would ask, if you can tonight, to vote. We would like to be able to go to Planning Commission for final site plan review, knowing the summer schedule's coming up. We will be in front of the ARB. We're set for their meeting to go over any of the design features, elements, and I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ranker.
Madam President, I have one question.
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Is there going to be a wall around the property?
To my knowledge, there is not going to be a wall, but Mr. Hanson here can answer.
No, there won't be a wall. There's a courtyard fence, like a residential fence in the courtyard, but that's it, no wall.
Doesn't our ordinance require that?
I haven't been told that, I don't know that. I think that would, I mean.
It's a commercial facility, correct?
Well, it's residential. It's a residential home for families.
And there's none on
It's the definition of
Som.
family.
There's no wall.
I mean, we would put in a wall if you wanted, but I don't know that would be nice looking.
But I mean, it's a fair question, but this is a residential use. This is not a commercial use.
Thank you.
I know
Mrs.
you give me
Teresi?
that smile, but I mean, the whole design of it seriously is to provide really a familial setup for people who live there. So for the residents, it's like being in the neighborhood.
And it meets the definition of family in the code. And we went through all of that with the zoning board.
I think Mrs. Teresi had one more question.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Will you landscape next to the Geraci property, to the
Yes.
east, west, to the
I
west?
know that in this drawing it shows some of the landscaping. So over here where we thought it would have the greatest impact on either of these houses, we put like big evergreen trees or those large arborvitae, something along those lines, to provide a screen on both of those areas.
And then there was another drawing, and it was the drawing where you increased the rooms, where you added the sunroom.
Yeah, we decided that it was a better use of the space, that it would provide the residents with a larger secondary area, because originally we had this small area right here as like another community room, but we thought it would be better to add a conservatory. Bruce keeps calling it a sunroom, but it's really more of a conservatory look is what it's going to have.
So my question is, there are the two, they look like the doorways, or whatever.
Yeah, French doors.
No, out on the side, on the east side of the move over, no, keep going to the east.
Over
Right
here?
there, those two, you
Right.
looked at that side of the
side
building,
view.
which, the building itself is beautiful, and then
Sure.
you have the loading dock there. So I was hoping that you weren't gonna put a corral or a dumpster there.
No, it's just going to be a fence. It's going to look like an extension of the fence. It'll be the same material, but it'll just be closed off from the courtyard.
I'm sorry, but we're out of time again. So can we maybe come back to this conversation when we get to the agenda item? And we will move on. Is there anybody else that wanted to speak this evening? Miss?
My name's Erin Harrod. I'm here on behalf of Joseph Myers Architects, 38030 2nd Street, Willoughby, Ohio. I'm here to present the Temple of Israel. All we have done for this project is create a small addition that will add a couple classrooms for the existing hotel. So we're not planning to add any occupants. We're just planning to increase the space for the people that already attend. And I'm here if you have any questions today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else that has an agenda item would like to speak?
Problem occurs, we don't really have a long-term solution. The problem has been continually watched, and we can never really relax thinking that it's going to be taken care of. Joe Finaro and his staff have spent many hours looking at the pool, looking after the pool. Last summer, this included him coming in on weekends to make sure everything was open correctly throughout the summer and putting out fires on a regular basis. I say this not to cause alarm, just to let you all know where we're at with the state of our pool and the challenges involved with opening and operating this pool. So it's not getting any older as it ages. So thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman.
Mrs. Teresi?
Thank you. I have one quick question. I walk and I saw like a hose coming out of the little brick building there by the pool, and it was filling with water, and the hose was just running. What was that? What was, I mean, the water was coming out of this hose and going into the pool right by that small brick building where there's a tank or whatever.
Yeah, so that's water that was leaking that we're trying to recapture.
Leaking out of the pool?
Yes. So we're trying to recapture it.
Well, Mr. Ward, we may want to look at a city as putting together some kind of committee or subcommittee to look at putting together a new pool, but maybe we could talk about that at the end of the summer.
I know that's a discussion point. I just want to let you know where we're at on that.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Is there anyone else that would like to speak this evening? Seeing none, we'll close the portion at public portion 7:06. We'll move to resolutions. We will begin tonight with resolution 2018-31. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Resolution number 2018-31, a resolution confirming the action of the Board of Zoning Appeals of the City of Mayfield Heights in granting to Byron D. Myers on behalf of Christine M. Fierro, 1419 Lander Road, a variance to place a concrete turnaround pad in the rear yard 7 feet from the property line. Cuyahoga County permanent parcel number 861-13-072. First reading.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mr. Mano, seconded by Mrs. Snyder. Roll call on the motion to suspend, please.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Ballestria?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Mano, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. Discussion, Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes, this application is due to a driveway violation. The committee, seeing the hardship, the narrow width of the lot, the committee felt the area was needed to better park and maneuver. This is a 3-foot variance setback.
Thank you. Is there any questions for Mrs. Sabetta? Any further comments?
The applicant is here.
Okay, any comments? Okay, roll call, please, Lisa.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes.
Mr. Ballestria?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes. Resolution 2000-1831 has passed. Next on our agenda is Resolution 2018-32. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Resolution 2018-32, a resolution confirming the action of the Board of Zoning Appeals of the City of Mayfield Heights in granting to Byron D. Myers on behalf of Christine M. Fierro, 1419 Lander Road, a variance to add a 22-foot by 13-foot concrete turnaround pad in the rear yard. Cuyahoga County permanent parcel number 861-13-072. First reading.
Thank you. Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mrs. Snyder, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Ballestria?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestria, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. Mrs. Sabetta, discussion?
Yes, along with the driveway, the owner wants to replace and enlarge the turnaround pad. It's a variance to add the turnaround pad. The drawing shows it being moved away from the house, but using almost the same amount of existing area. Seeing the hardship and considering the long length of the lot, the committee felt this would be better use and beautification of the property.
Thank you. Is there any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, roll call, please.
Mr. Balestria?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes, Resolution 2018-32 is passed. Next on our agenda is Resolution 2018-33. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Resolution 2018-33, a resolution confirming the action of the Board of Zoning Appeals of the City of Mayfield Heights in granting to Michael Kiken, 6404 Woodhawk Drive, a variance to widen the driveway at the residence to 25 feet at the garage and to taper down to the public sidewalk. Cuyahoga County Permanent Parcel Number 863-15-061. First reading.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mrs. Snyder, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Balestria?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mrs. Sabetta, seconded by Mr. Balestria. Mrs. Sabetta, further discussion?
Yes, the applicant is requesting a 7-foot variance that tapers down to the public sidewalk. The committee felt the short length of the driveway due to the garage location caused a hardship. There was no other place to park. Many homes on the street have the same type of extension. Several neighbors were notified, 2 responded. The next door neighbor has no problem with the extension. The neighbor across the street does have an issue with the extension, though they have the same extension in their driveway.
Thank you, Mrs. Sabetta. Any questions for Mrs. Sabetta? Mrs. Tressi?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The drawing says it's a 9-foot proposed parking pad, and you just said it was 7.
The variance is 7.
Okay.
Because they have a 16 and they're allowed an 18 foot.
Thank you.
So, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to finish. In 2016, we had the Posanti family here. Actually, we had 2 resolutions that pertain to the Posanti family. They had a blended family with 5 children. They had 5 cars and a truck in their driveway. And we put that family through all sorts of things. We did one resolution. It was denied because we said there was no practical difficulty. And actually, we all voted no. We all voted to go along with BZA to deny, including you, Mrs. Sabetta. Each and every one of us did. And then I know Mrs. Snyder talked to Mr. Posanti. We brought him back. We asked him to go back to the building department. And even with 5 cars and a truck, we refused to give him that variance. Now, I understand that there are a ton of driveways on Woodhawk that have, expanded driveways, more than 18 foot. Many of them didn't come before us, including the very first house that parks an RV and a city truck in it. They didn't come for a variance. They didn't go for a permit. And so now here we are. We have someone that just a year ago we said definitely not. You are not going to get this extension. And if you drive by that house today, there are still 5 cars parked in that driveway. And yet, we're saying that this is a practical difficulty. And I read the letter, and it's for a child who's home from college. Is she home forever, or is she home for the summer? I think it's, you know, it makes me feel really badly for other residents where we refuse them. And here we are saying that we should give this to a resident. We either have to change the ordinance and let everybody extend their driveways, or we have to stick to the ordinances that us 7 legislatures put together. You know, you have to feel bad for the people on ranch land that have a 1-car garage and a single driveway. So I'm really upset about this, because I feel that we were terribly, if we pass this, we're terribly unfair to the Basante family. And they truly, truly had a hardship. Not 1 car in the yard that they did not want to move, but 5 cars and a truck. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Teresi. Mrs. Snyder?
I also agree with you. That was horrible for them, and I know we're supposed to take each case as it comes before us. So I know there was probably more emotion that went into the meeting with their practical difficulty, but can you tell me a little bit about how that was displayed that night at the meeting? Like, what is their, I mean, the Pasante family had the same situation. They had kids coming home from college and didn't have jobs, and it seemed like a nightmare for them, but we didn't allow it. And then this one has the same situation. She's coming home from college, but I'm not quite sure what the practical difficulty is there.
Well, is the applicant here? Yes. He can explain to you. He has a handicapped wife, and...
Sir, if you would approach the podium and state your name and address, please.
My name is Michael Kakin. I'm at 6404 Woodhook Drive. Good evening again. So I didn't know about other residents from my street as applicants with the same variance. I'm sorry. My issue is that, well, my kid, she came back from college permanently. She just graduating from Ohio State, and she's planning to admit Cleveland State Law School. So we're talking about at least 4 or 5 years of her staying in this house. My wife, she is handicapped. She has a problem with her knee, and our driveway is shorter. The garage is set not as far away from the driveway as other houses. And when we parking my kid's car on the driveway, it creates a hardship for us to maneuver around. Now, even if I live earlier to work and my wife passes her car, she's nervous about scratching her car and my daughter's car. And at the winter time, when it's slippery, it creates a really big dilemma and problem to us. As she fell a couple of times, we had to go to the emergency room, check her knee if the concrete has moved, and so on and so forth. That's why we applied for this variance. We didn't apply till we had a real issue with our child grown up and become adult and living an adult life, going to work, going to study. Hope this answers your questions.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments? Mr. Mano?
You have a 2-car garage?
Yes.
Is the garage utilized for the cars?
Yes, absolutely. 2-car garage, 3 of us. Mine and my wife's car is in the garage, and my kid's car is behind on the driveway. So basically, we have to make that kind of maneuvering all time alone to get to and from the garage. And me and my wife, we work our work schedules at different time, so we do leave house at different time. And I am trying to be participating into a house, helping her to run house, but she's a lady and she takes it offensively, and
Mr. DeJohn?
Thank you, Madam President. If we will remember, after the Pasante situation, I did call for a building committee back in September 29th, 2016, We talked extensively on the ordinance and how ambiguous it is and how gray it is. But yet at that time, we did not come up with a solution to it. So I really think we need to come up with a solution to it. Because we can't allow BZA to pick and choose who they want to help and who they don't want to help. And that's what it seems like in this situation. You know, and what's good for one is good for the other, is the way I feel. And, you know, I can't really vote on this tonight because I feel bad for the Pizzatis. We allow one person something. Now, we do need 5 votes to overturn this, and it's virtually impossible to overturn it tonight. But I just think this is a travesty, and we should revisit this.
Thank you, Mr. DeJohn. Lisa, can I have a roll call, please?
Madam President.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Sabetta.
I just wanted to say that, you know, when you sit on the BZA, you are told by the chairman that each case is viewed separately, and that's put in your mind. The second thing I'd like to say is that the chairman did say that he felt that the shortness of the driveway from where the garage is to the sidewalk, and that with the amount of people on the street who have already have this short type of extension, and he voted, this was a unanimous vote. And I understand the Pasantes. The Pasantes came back and forth, back and forth. They do have a different type of driveway. Their garage is in a different place, the Pasantes, and I felt bad about that too. But
you
again,
didn't vote for it.
Okay, Mrs. Teresi, you're out of line. Mrs. Snyder?
I think we do need to have a building committee meeting, and I will try and get something scheduled if that's okay.
You know, but we've done this here back in the
Forever.
day, over and over. And if I'm not mistaken, and I think, I always go back to, because me and Mrs. Snyder were on billing together for like, I don't know, 4 years straight. And we did decide at that point, after going back and forth through meetings, and I'm sure a lot of you sat through these meetings, that it was better to bring it in as a case by case.
Right.
And because there was no, where do you stop? Then somebody's gonna want wider and wider and wider, and that's why we did extend it at that time. You have to look when that was, I can't remember, maybe the early 2000s. And then we did extend it at that point, and then when they came in and said, okay, now the next one wants even wider, that's when we said, let's take it to BZA as a case by case. So I don't know the history right off the top of my head of the dates, but Mrs.
I
Snyder?
mean, he has presented us with a hardship, and that's the whole reason we do these.
Correct. Thank you, Mrs. Snyder. Mr. Mano?
Mrs. Sabato, do you know what the distance is from that garage to the street?
it would be on the drawing. I did drive up there, we all drove up through this. It would be on the drawing.
Mr. Murphy.
If I could jump in, the drawing indicates that there is 30 feet between the front of the garage and the sidewalk.
That's a substantial distance. I got people on my street would drive up garages that don't have that much room and have 4 cars. You just get out and move them around when they have to. I mean, you know, you can make any situation into a hardship if you want to. In this case, you got 3 vehicles. So if somebody has to get out, then one person should get in the other vehicle and move it out so the other person can get out. I mean, you're talking about changing the whole ordinance for convenience. I don't think that it's meant to be changed for convenience.
Thank you, Mr. Mano. Okay, so we're going to ask for the roll call, but we're going to remind everyone that this, the BZA did unanimously vote for this. Roll call, please, Lisa.
Mrs. Sabato?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
No.
Mr. Ballestria?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
No.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Abstain.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes. So what was the vote? I'm sorry. I always get confused if there's a 4. Okay, so,
4,
Um,
4, 2, no, and 1 abstention.
okay, so 2018-33 has passed, sir. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda is Resolution 2018-34. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Resolution 2018-34, a resolution confirming the action of the Board of Zoning Appeals of the City of Mayfield Heights in granting to Derek Hansen on behalf of Song One LLC, 30091 Cedar Road, a variance to reduce the building setback from Cedar Road from 90 feet to 80 feet. Cuyahoga County Permanent Parcel Number 861-30-011. First reading.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Do I have a motion to suspend the rules?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Mano, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call, please, Lisa.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Belestria?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestria,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Mano. Mrs. Sabetta, back to you.
Council already approved the use exception recommendation by the BZA as residential use. The U2A1 is consistent with the adjacent properties. The request meets the practical difficulty criteria, seeing that the curb cuts are as far north and west as possible. This is a 10-foot setback variance, 80 feet from Cedar Road. And it's also contingent on council final site plan approval.
Thank you, Mrs. Sabetta. Any questions for Mrs. Sabetta? Mr. DeJohn, I'm sorry.
So this is more for Mr. Balestria. When it goes back to planning, would you check on the wall on that property, please, and report back to us at the next meeting? The wall around the property.
There's no wall needed because it's residential.
I don't think it's residential, it's a commercial facility. So I think it should be looked into.
It's zoned residential, though.
It's
Did we-
not a zoning.
Right.
It's not a
But
zoning.
the house is for living.
It's a use exception on U2A1.
I understand that. We also have it on Landerhaven. We just approved a facility, senior facility, that they were required to have a wall around the property, and we gave them a variance not to have that wall. I'm just asking Mr. Balestria to look at it.
I'll check it out. I'll check it.
Okay.
I'll meet with the law director.
Okay, thank you, Mr. DeJohn. Any other questions? Roll call, please, Lisa.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes.
Mr. Belestria?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes, Resolution 2018-34 is passed. We will move on to Resolution 2018-35. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Excuse me. Resolution 2018-35, a resolution confirming the action of the Board of Zoning Appeals of the City of Mayfield Heights in granting to Derek Hansen on behalf of Song One LLC, 30091 Cedar Road, a variance to reduce the lot size requirement. Cuyahoga County Permanent Parcel Number 861-30-011. First reading.
Thank you. Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestria, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Belestria?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Mano, seconded by Mrs. Snyder. Discussion. I think we heard a little bit about this earlier. Is there any other discussion? Mrs. Sabata, anything?
Yes, it's a request for a 2.1 acre lot size variance. The non-conforming lot size, 0.9 acre. The committee, seeing the surrounding parcels and the previous use exception, the committee saw the difficulty in the owner's use of the property. again contingent on council's final site plan.
Thank you, Mrs. Sabetta. Nothing further? Oh, Mrs. Teresi.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I have a question. I don't know if it's for Mr. Fenaro or, and it has to do with striping there. When we did the rehab facility, we said, you said you were going to restripe and move that center lane further down. Will that be a problem for this facility where their driveway is?
It's not getting moved further down, further to the east, so you can see the little dip going.
Right. So it won't be a problem for them. Okay.
That's scheduled to do when we come up.
Right. I just wondered if it would impact their drive.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything further? Roll call, please, Lisa.
Mr. Balestria?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes. Resolution 2018-35 is passed. Next on our agenda is Resolution 2018-36. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Resolution 2018-36, a resolution approving a lot split of Cuyahoga County Permanent Parcel Number 862-31-099 to create a 1.1029 acre parcel for a new Chick-fil-A restaurant, 6390 Mayfield Road. First reading.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mrs. Snyder,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Balestria. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Balestria?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestria, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. Any discussion? Mr. DeJohn?
So I need somebody to explain this to me.
Oh, Mr. Balestria?
This is a lot split. This is a restaurant that wants to have its own parcel. So they're carving out part of Golden Gate in the front end, so they will have their own parcel. So that's the lot split. So Chick-fil-A will have their own rectangular shaped parcel that they own.
They'll own the parcel then, so the owners of Golden Gate sold that parcel to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Balestria. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Balestria?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes. Resolution 2018-36 has passed. Next, Resolution 2018-37, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Resolution 2018-37, a resolution accepting a certain bid for 6 uninterruptible power supply systems for traffic signals and declaring an emergency. The proposed contractor is Signal Service Company. First reading.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mr. Balestria, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Balestria?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mr. Mano, seconded by Mrs. Snyder. Discussion? Mr. Balestria?
Yeah, again, this was brought up at Public Works meeting. Council had approved for us to go out on bid for these power supply systems for traffic signals. It was recommended by the Public Works Committee. You received a memo from Mr. Tribby in your packet, and I asked Mr. Fernaro to include what intersections would house those units. There were 6 of them, and you could see that was included on the memo as well. And I think it was 2 hours, wasn't it? You get an extra 2 hours with these units. So if the signal goes down, goes on battery backup, we've got 2 hours to get them repaired. They'll kick over and run the signal without having to use our safety forces and run the risk of some safety issues when these go down. It did come in under bid, so you know, and Mr. Tribby pointed out that we only had a number of bids went out, and we only got one response. So, and that's who was awarded the contract was Signal Service Company, and that's what's before you this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Balestria. Mr. Mano?
Could have used that last week. That transformer went out.
Actually, Marsal was,
Why are all these transformers blowing? We had the Memorial Day, the one in the village went out, and we were without power for 4 or 5 hours.
Correct, so twice this weekend we could have used them. Friday night, we had 6-hour delay in service from Lander to Woodrow went out, which we were able to get generators out. In the process of doing that, we lost Baygate to Golden Gate. Once we got those up and running, we lost Parker to Sampson. And that was Friday. We had the same thing on Monday.
I hope this is an omen of what's to come.
You're gonna see in the budget next year, probably 6 more.
I was just gonna say, maybe we should start looking at, I know on the way here, I don't know why, but Marsal was flashing.
Yeah, there's no power over there.
Are those,
Or no.
My house
no,
had power,
lights,
so.
with the lights.
Well, while I was driving here. Mr. Mano?
are those, Joe, are those transformers on a rotation basis, or are they governed by age, or do they just wait till one blows and then change it?
Wait, one blows in the
Okay.
Mrs. Teresi?
Thanks, Madam Chairman. On the quotation, it states that the city's going to install cabinet foundation to accommodate larger cabinet enclosures. What is the additional cost going to be for that? And the price does not include a performance or maintenance bond. What,
I'm sorry.
oh,
Yelling at me for not telling them the light was flashing.
oh.
I didn't have my phone, sorry.
You might have to still go do that.
I don't think you're allowed to yell at the mayor during council.
It was quiet, you didn't even hear me say it. But
Apparently he
I
did.
missed your question though.
My question was, on the bottom of the quote, it mentions that, it's a note. It said, the city is to install cabinet foundations to accommodate the larger cabinet enclosures, and the city is to provide the traffic control for the project, and the price does not include a performance or maintenance bond.
So
Are those costs to the city?
it's gonna be cost to extend the foundations, which we're gonna do. So the box that is there, the foundation has to be made bigger to
Accommodate the
a
bigger box? Okay.
Yeah, that will be a cost to the city.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Finaro. Could we have a roll call, please, Lisa?
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes.
Mr. Balestria?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes. Resolution 2018-37 has been passed. Next, we'll move on to Resolution 2018-38. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Resolution 2018-38, a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into an agreement with United Healthcare Services, Inc. and the Fidelity Group to provide billing and collection services in connection with the city's healthcare coverage and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Is there a motion to suspend the rules? Moved by Mr. Balestria, seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Balestria?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes. Is there a motion to approve? Moved by Mrs. Sabetta, seconded by Mr. Balestria. Discussion, Mayor? Anything to add?
Well, you received a memo from the law director explaining the need for this resolution. Basically, United Healthcare requires this type of agreement, whereas Aetna or our previous suppliers of healthcare did not.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman?
Mrs. Teresi?
Thank you. What is that fee going to be to the Fidelity Group?
I believe, was it, you know,
It's
the
in
exact figure?
It's in the agreement.
Fee is in the agreement?
Yeah.
believe it's around
$47.25.
Yeah, I was gonna say $45 or so.
Per,
47.
per employee?
Employee.
Correct.
Per
I'm
month.
sorry, $45 per, $45 per employee
no.
per month?
$47.25 per employee per month.
And what were we paying the Fidelity Group when we had Aetna and the other coverage?
Mr. Trivy?
We weren't paying them anything. The commission was paid directly to them by the healthcare provider. It was obviously embedded in the premiums, but the commissions were paid by the insurance company to the Fidelity Group. It's like any other situation where you buy an insurance policy. You don't pay the agent who sells you the policy. The company pays the agent the commission. This is what this is, a commission.
This is the commission?
Yes.
Yes.
And it's already included in the premiums that we're paying.
And didn't we had a meeting, I believe a few years ago with Ms. Zeller did a healthcare committee meeting to determine what we were paying, I think the commission, when we had Aetna or one of the other coverages. Do you remember what that was? Because I remember something about, that was why we kept the Fidelity Group, because, you know, the good service and et cetera, but I know we were paying them a commission, and we wondered what that commission was at that time. You remember, Mayor, or Mr. Tribby?
No, I was not involved in that.
We had meetings to interview companies to do what Fidelity does. And
Right.
yeah, we ultimately chose Fidelity.
Right, exactly, and I thought.
Which all those companies would be doing the exact same thing as Fidelity,
Correct,
getting us health care and collecting a fee per.
of course.
Right.
Right. I just wondered if you knew what that fee was at that time through.
I'm sure it's
like,
probably relatively the same, although this healthcare, the costs have gone down because of the healthcare committee choosing different coverages. But so that it might be less now than it was then, considering the coverage is less, the expense is less.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I have a roll call, please, Lisa?
Excuse me. Mr. Balestria?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes. Resolution 2000-18-38 has passed. Next, we'll move on to ordinances. Ordinance 2018-16. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ordinance number 2018-16, an ordinance partially suspending the rules and regulations regarding the sale, possession, and consumption of alcohol at the Mayfield Heights Park during both Mayfield Heights Unity Days and Mayfield Heights Drive-In Frenzy in 2018, and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Thank you. Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Mano. Seconded by Mrs. Snyder. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Balestria?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Mano. Do I have a second? Seconded by Mrs. Snyder. Okay, discussion. I know we've talked about this quite a bit, and we voted on this the last meeting, and now we are re-voting on it. Maybe, Mr. Murphy, you better explain it, Claire.
I just wanted to clarify that I would prefer an ordinance, since we are modifying the ordinance prohibiting the sale of alcohol in the park. I spoke with Lisa and said we really should have an ordinance if we are going to change any portion of the existing ordinance. So I know there was a roll call vote done at the last meeting, but I think it's cleaner to, if you're going to change the ordinance temporarily, you may as well do it by ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Can we have a roll call, please, Lisa?
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Balestria?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes. Ordinance 2018-16 stands approved. Next, ordinance 2018-17. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ordinance number 2018-17, an ordinance amending section 957 of the codified ordinances of the city titled Sale, Consumption of Alcohol at City Events by amending section 957.01. First reading.
Thank you. Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Mano. Seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to suspend.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Balestria?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Mano. Second. Seconded by Mrs. Snyder. Discussion. Mr. Mano, was there anything? I know you presented the ordinance.
The reason for doing the ordinance was so that the recreation director does not have to continually come to council for approvals. He is the director, and I mean, we're not going to serve martinis at the bunny breakfast. The thing is that events come up. Some come up when this council's on recess. There's a lot of different factors involved, but I think that as the director, that he should have the authority to make the call. We've not had any problems at all with alcohol being served at city events. It's been very well policed. I don't expect there to be any problems in the future, and I just think it saves time and allows the director to do his job. That's it.
Thank you. Any further discussion, Mr. Balestria?
No, I would disagree with Mr. Mano. As legislators, we're called ultimately to be those responsible for the public safety and the well-being of the city. I don't think that should fall on the director's shoulders. I think it's ultimately our responsibility to make that call when minors may be present. And I remember we had a big drawn-out discussion years ago when I was on council over an alcohol ordinance. It was overwhelmingly supported by the residents. It passed by this council, and I see no reason why we should change that ordinance. I think everything should be reviewed on a case-by-case basis. Mr. Ward's not going to be here for the entire life. This ordinance may be on the books, and who knows what the new directors that may come in may want to do. So ultimately, that responsibility falls here with us. And I was confused as to why we would introduce this and introduce the previous ordinance. If we were going to pass this ordinance, then that ordinance would not have been necessary, because everything would have been, allowed and determined by the director of Recreation and Parks. So I would want to see, on a case-by-case basis, when things are presented to the council as far as wanting to serve alcoholic beverages, on what the safety issues that come up and what the safety ramifications may be as to where it's being served. Is it being policed? Are we going to have a police officer there? I as a legislator would want those reassurances that everything is taken care of. Not to say anything derogatory toward Mr. Ward or the Recreation Department, but I don't think it's ultimately his responsibility. It's ours.
Thank you, Mr. Balestria. Anybody else? Mr. Mano.
I would respectfully disagree with Mr. Balestria. First of all, the mayor is the safety director of this city. He is the ultimate person to protect the health, safety, and welfare of this community. The council can recommend things, can legislate things, but ultimately it's the mayor's decision. The directors serve at the pleasure of the mayor, not the pleasure of the council. Now, if there's any kind of a problem that would ever develop, in the event we change directors, in the event that there's a problem, that becomes solely the purview of the mayor to make a decision one way or the other as to what he's going to do. If a new director comes in here, all you got to do is sit him down and explain to him our program and what we expect. And he complies, and it's that simple. I just think that oversight by council on something like this is not necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mano. Mrs. Sabetta?
Mr. Mano, I've been on council for 4 years. This is going my 5th. And, you know, council has always had a hand in this. They've come to us, and we have 7 people here who could make a decision. What type of liability are we putting on our department for, you know, having him responsible for this?
I've served on this council for 16 years, going on 17. We've never had a problem with this situation. I don't know why we have to create such a big deal over serving alcohol in our city park and our city functions. The ordinance is clear. It cannot be sold by anybody but the city. It cannot be taken off city property and sold or used. I just don't understand why there's such a big deal. Mr. Ward is the director. That's his purview. Why would you diminish his authority to make a call on something like that? I think it's very unfair.
Thank you.
Just one more question. The other thing is, you know, it's been working well. It's been working well with council. Why would you change it? Why?
Exactly, it's been working well, so why would we do anything? All we're doing is eliminating the need for the director to have to come before council for each and every situation that requires or allows for alcohol to be used in the city. What's the point? Do we tell the chief he's got to write a certain number of tickets? We don't do that. He's the chief. He's in charge. You give the man in charge the latitude to make the proper decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Mano. Lisa, can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes.
Mr. Balestria?
No.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Sorry, I did it. Mrs. Sabetta?
No.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes. Ordinance number 2018-17 stands approved. Next, we'll move on to ordinance 2018-18. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ordinance number 2018-18, an ordinance amending Chapter 511 of the Codified Ordinances of the City titled Alcoholic Beverages by amending Section 511.07. First reading.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Is there a motion to suspend the rules?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Mano.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. Roll call on the motion to suspend, please, Lisa.
Mrs. Tressi?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Balestria?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes. Is there a motion to approve?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Mano, seconded by Mrs. Snyder. Mr. Murphy, any discussion?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. In preparing the prior ordinance, I looked at the rest of the city's codified ordinances and thought that there would be a question that if somebody had an open container in the park pursuant to the prior ordinance, it may be illegal to do so under this ordinance. So I figured we should amend this one in order to provide that you could have open containers at an event on city-owned property that is sponsored or co-sponsored by the city. So this goes part and parcel with the prior ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Any questions for Mr. Murphy,
I
Mr.
do.
Balestria?
Paul, is that alcohol that's purchased on the property from the city, or is that allowing folks to bring it in open container?
No, you can't bring in an open container. That's in the prior ordinance. This is for consumption purchased for consumption at an event on city-owned property that is sponsored by the city. You can't bring it in.
Okay, but the way it reads, it says been lawfully purchased for consumption at an event on city-owned property, but it doesn't specifically say sold by the city.
No, but
That
it
can make a
says
difference.
purchased at an event.
On city-owned property.
Right. So you purchase it at the event.
Okay.
Thank you. Any
Call
further
report.
questions? Mrs. Teresi?
I know that last year, my husband and I worked the beer tent for the bocce courts, and there was no one that was drunk. There was no problem with the alcohol. They purchased a great deal of beer because it was hot and there were so many teams, and it didn't seem that we had any problems at all. Last year we had police presence everywhere, and it really worked, and that was the second tent. I believe there was one closer to the front gates. And I think the residents, I don't believe they have a problem with, buying. Many of the residents played bocce, so they didn't seem to have any problem. You didn't see anybody walking around inebriated. So it seemed to work really well last year. I know that years ago we never allowed the alcohol in the park, but I think last year we were all pleasantly surprised at how well our police department did in having their presence known in that park while people were drinking.
Thank you, Mrs. Teresi. I agree with Mrs. Teresi. And to go a step further, I think that there's less people inebriated since we've sold it than when people were sneaking it in.
Right.
So that's why I think we really need to make it legal, because they're not sneaking it in when they could buy it, and they're too cheap to buy more than two, so.
They were bringing in coolers, if
Right,
I remember
coolers.
correctly.
Correct. Can I have a roll call, please, Lisa?
Mr. Balestria?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes. Ordinance number 2018-18 stands approved. And last ordinance tonight, 2018-19. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ordinance number 2018-19, an ordinance enacting Chapter 910 of the Codified Ordinances of the City titled Small Cell Facilities and Wireless Support Structures and declaring an emergency. First reading.
Okay, we're going to ask for this to be placed on first reading. Can I have a motion?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Mano, seconded by Mrs. Snyder. Can we have a roll call, please, Lisa?
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Balestria?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Teresi?
Yes.
Mrs. Finney?
Yes. Ordinance number 2018-19 will be on first reading, and we sent that to committee. Next, we'll go to motions. Motion A, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A motion to confirm the decision of the Planning Commission approving a preliminary site plan for a 5,974 square foot residential care facility for Song 1 at 30091 Cedar Road.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Do I have a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestria,
Second?
seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. Mr. Balestria, did you have any discussion on this?
Only that I would ask, I want to say Mayor Rinker, if that's okay. Bruce, if it's okay, if you're not going to have any further changes between now and final, I would not be opposed to making this a preliminary and a final this evening, so you can go forth.
If I may, the short answer is we have no changes. We've gone through that mill. But I would like to respond to Mr. DeJohn's question concerning the wall. Just a suggestion, if I may. If you look at Chapter 1169, which is the chapter that governs the development that's along Lander Haven Drive, let me just refer to it real quickly here. And again, this subject council and the law department coming through, but I think this will point the way to answer the question concerning the wall. So 1169 is the U3C Senior Citizen Apartments with Life Care Facilities districts. And it's kind of an apples and oranges. That district looks to a 12-acre site versus the U2A1, which typically looks at a 3, and in our case we're looking at basically a 1 acre. But the code section specifically calls out in Chapter 1169, and it's 1169-12. It has certain buffer requirements, and I'll read in rear and side yards of a U3C district adjoining any district other than another apartment district. So in that case, you had the residences south of the site that front on the north side of Cedar Road. Plus you also had to the east, just at the end of Lander Haven where it curves around, you've got the condominium set up there as well. But to continue, the City Planning Commission shall require the installation of a 6-foot high vision impairing masonry wall of face brick or split face brick in order to create a buffer area where such other district adjoins or abuts a rear or side yard of this district. So again, I mean, the specific purpose in the code, as it's called out, is they want opacity. They want to block that field of vision against the residential areas for privacy, I'm assuming, and people can enjoy their pre-existing residential use. In our case, and it's why I wanted to return to it, we really are designing this to be a residential facility in a very true sense of the word. But the code under 1162.10 for this subset in the district does not require the same kind of masonry wall. So it's the distinction that the code itself draws.
Thank you, Mr. Rinker.
Yeah, thank you.
So we would like now a motion to approve as a preliminary and final site plan. Could I have a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Mano, seconded by Mr. Balestria. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion A stands. We'll move to motion B, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Motion to confirm the decision of the Planning Commission approving a preliminary final site plan for a 2,660 square foot garden crypt at Knollwood Cemetery, 1678 Som Center Road.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Do I have a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestria, seconded by Mr. Mano. Discussion. This is for the Knollwood Cemetery. I know we discussed this in the past. Any questions further?
We did?
Yeah, we had, we saw this at the last meeting, I thought, didn't we? Or am I just thinking of looking at the Planning Commission minutes? Okay, Planning Commission.
I thought maybe I missed something.
Mr. Balestria, is there anything you have to add?
This was approved unanimously as a preliminary as well as a final approval. They're adding one more unit, and they're also going to have a access driveway off of Marsal. So when the funeral procession comes in and they stop at the building, then the hearse and the procession can go right out to Marsal. It'll be gated as well. I don't know if it's going to be gated during normal hours of operation or just used for funeral processions, but there will be an access drive as well, just so the council's aware of that.
Thank you, Mr. Balestria. I think it's a great idea, actually. Any other further discussion, Mr. DeJohn?
Mr. Balestria, where's that drive going to be? Is it existing there now?
The drive is, but not the access drive onto Marsal. So the drive, I think, is just an access.
It's going to be directly north of that new building. So if you drove, that new building is going to be
west,
perpendicular
to the existing,
to Marsal, and the drive is going to be a if you continued down the building to Marsal, that's where the drive would be. So directly across from it should be in the drawing there, in your rendering. That one right there, yeah, that you have there.
So there'll be two drives on Marsal,
Correct.
two egress and ingress on Marsal.
Yeah.
And I think probably they should keep it closed and only use it for when funerals come in.
I think they're having a gate, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Balestria.
Yes.
There'll be up gates, so it will be closed. Thank you. Anything further? Okay, if not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion B has passed. Motion C, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Motion to confirm the decision of the Planning Commission approving a preliminary site plan for a 4,655 square foot addition to Temple Israel near Tamid, 1732 Lander Road.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Do I have a motion to approve?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Balestria, seconded by Mrs. Snyder. Discussion, we heard from the applicant. She said there would not, this is just to enlarge the classrooms, no additional children or people in the building. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion C stands approved. We will move on to motion D. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Motion to confirm the decision of the Planning Commission approving a preliminary final site plan for an 864 square foot storage building at Landerhaven, 6111 Landerhaven Drive.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Do I have a motion to approve?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Mano,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Balestria. I think we all read from the Planning Commission. This was Mr. Balestria for Mr.
Yeah, they,
Diamond?
the home across the street that was owned by Executive Caterers was sold, and they had used that for storage. And as such, they needed another site, an additional space to store maintenance equipment. So they were asking for an 864 square foot storage building at the rear of the property. We didn't find anything to the contrary to not approve it. It was a unanimous decision. And again, this is a preliminary and a final.
Thank you, Mr. Balestria. Any questions for Mr. Balestria?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Mr. Balestria, did they say what material it was gonna be constructed out of?
Yeah, they did.
ARB did approve the building.
Yeah, I do
Yeah, just so,
understand. Yeah, I understand that ARB
They
did,
did
but-
change the siding, and I can't remember, I think it was it aluminum siding? Vertical aluminum siding that the ARB requested them to do, and they.
So it'll
applied.
fit in with the rest of
The rest of
Land.
the decor of the building.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Madam.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yeah, the minutes from ABR say exterior material to be white corrugated metal panel siding.
Thank you, Mrs. Sabetta. Anything further? Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Mrs. Teresi is abstaining.
Yes.
Do we need a roll call, Lisa, or are we okay? Okay, okay. Then motion D stands approved. We'll move on to motion E. Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Motion to prepare a letter of intent with Gardner Service Company to conduct an investment-grade audit in order to determine which projects should be implemented using the NOPEC Energy Grant Funds.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Do I have a motion to approve?
Move.
Moved by Mr. Balestria,
Second.
seconded by Mr. DeJohn. Discussion. Mayor, anything you want to add?
There was a meeting held with Gardner and Joe Finaro. Joe, I think it's best if you kind of explain what Gardner's going to do and the ins and outs of the of what they're going to do exactly.
You can give it a brief synopsis since it's getting so late.
Yeah, all right, I'll make it short. So, we identified certain projects that we want to accomplish with our NOPEC money. Gardner has proposed to do the audit of our equipment, and that's our next steps moving forward. So that's the real quick answer. What's before you tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Finaro.
One
Mr.
quick
Mano?
One quick question. Is the feasibility of a gas well included in that situation, or can't?
It'll be looked at.
It'll be looked at. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. DeJohn, did you have a question?
Mr. Finaro, I don't remember at the meeting, but, that feasibility study was gonna be 23,000?
23.
23,000.
23 something, okay.
23,000.
Now, is that gonna come out of the NOPEC grant?
As long as we do, if you remember from the meeting, as long as we do some kind of project within that study, that money will come out of the NOPEC grant.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for that clarification.
Anyone else? Mrs. Teresi?
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Type LEDs that would fit these kind of fixtures. So over the course of years, we would save quite a bit of money. So, and that's free money as well.
Thank you, Mr. Balestria. Mrs. Teresi?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Do we already have the grant Mr. Fenaro?
We do, you passed the resolution a few meetings back.
So we already have.
To go forward, so that was the first part of going forward with the grant, was passing the resolution.
Thank you. Mr. DeJohn?
Just one last thing. You'll be getting the minutes from that meeting sometime this coming week, so.
Thank you, Mr. DeJohn.
It'll
Okay.
It'll be a volume.
Yes, it'll help you clear up some of these questions.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Tracy.
Since we don't have the minutes and I wasn't at the meeting, I have one more question. Can we use any of the grant money to replace the equipment here in council chambers? I don't mean the lighting, but the access for the TV so our residents can see,
I would say,
you know, videos, things like that. I mean, that would be something.
I would say no, because it's not an energy efficient type project, and that would have to be used, am I right, Joe? Would have to be used for energy efficient
Only-
type projects.
Even though our wiring for the community is up near the lights, that wouldn't work.
I wouldn't think so.
Okay, just thought I'd ask, just trying to.
It was a nice stretch, but I don't think it would.
Mrs. Snyder?
Do you have an idea for the use of the money, a project?
It's the HVAC.
All the HVAC, got it, okay.
Thank you.
All
Okay,
the
roll
building-
call, please. Or, yeah, let's have a roll call on this one.
Mr. Mano?
Yes.
Mr. Belistria?
Yes.
Mr. DeJohn?
Yes.
Mrs. Sabetta?
Yes.
Mrs. Tracy?
Yes,
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes,
Mrs. Finney?
Yes, motion E has been approved. Is there any new business or comments from council? Seeing none, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Moved.
Moved by Mr. Balestria,
Second.
seconded by Mrs. Sabetta. All in favor signify by saying aye.
aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you for joining us this evening.